Week, we also learned Israeli police have reportedly frozen crypto accounts tied to Hamas, which has been designated a foreign terrorist organization by the US.
There are moments in history when the world stops, when everything we thought was stable, predictable, and permanent suddenly collapses overnight. The Israel-Gaza conflict has been one of those moments. It's not just a political war. It's an economic shockwave, one that's quietly forcing governments, banks, and institutions to rethink how money actually moves across borders in times of chaos. Because here's something most people don't realize. War exposes weaknesses not just in armies or governments, but in the global financial system itself. When conflict erupts, traditional banking rails start breaking down. Sanctions hit. Swift restrictions appear. Cross-border payment corridors shut down. Banks freeze accounts. Suddenly, moving money from one side of the world to another becomes an obstacle course of red tape and politics. And that's exactly what we're watching unfold. Charities, aid organizations, and even small businesses trying to send support or payments into the region are discovering that the existing system isn't built for crisis. Wire transfers take days, sometimes weeks. Intermediary banks block or delay transactions. And transparency? Practically non-existent. Once the money leaves your account, there's no clear trail until it lands, if it ever does. Now think about that for a second. In a war zone where minutes can mean lives, a system that moves at the speed of bureaucracy instead of the speed of need becomes part of the problem. That's where digital assets, and more specifically XRP and the Ripple ecosystem, come into focus. Because unlike most cryptos, XRP wasn't built to be just a speculative coin. It was designed to move value, fast, cheap, and globally. Ripple's entire vision from day one has been about solving this very issue. How to connect financial institutions around the world without relying on the outdated, fragile plumbing of the 1970s SWIFT network. So now, with another major conflict shaking global trade routes, sanctions piling up, and supply chains being restructured, the world is being reminded why a new global settlement standard is necessary. Let's be clear, no one's cheering for a war. But it's impossible to ignore how each geopolitical crisis in the last decade has accelerated technological change in finance. Think back to 2014, the first big round of sanctions on Russia after Crimea. Suddenly, de-dollarization wasn't just a fringe conversation. It became a serious strategy for dozens of nations. Then came 2022, when Russia was cut off from SWIFT. That single move woke up the entire world's financial community. Countries realized, if we can be cut off that easily, we need alternatives. And that's the kind of mindset spreading again right now. Conflicts like the Israel-Gaza war are forcing policymakers to face the uncomfortable truth. A centralized system gives too much control to too few players. Meanwhile, distributed ledgers like XRP Ledger offer something radically different. A way to bridge currencies instantly, settle transactions in seconds, and do it all transparently. That's why, behind closed doors, you're seeing renewed interest in blockchain solutions, not just from private institutions but also from humanitarian organizations, remittance companies, and even government-level agencies that need fast, auditable, and sanction-compliant payment systems. And let's be honest, most of these groups don't care about memes or trading hype. They care about getting value from point A to point B safely, legally, and fast. That's exactly what XRP was built to do. Now, what makes this war different is the scale of the financial disruption it's causing, and how global it's become. Energy routes through the Middle East are being rerouted. Supply chains from Europe to Asia are tightening again. And the dollar-based system is being tested under extreme stress. So, when people ask, why is XRP even relevant here? The answer is simple, because the problem it solves is becoming impossible to ignore. Ripple doesn't need to announce a new partnership every day to be relevant. Its entire architecture was designed for this, for cross-border payments when everything else stops working. And right now, that reliability is being noticed. Financial institutions are quietly reviewing liquidity bridge models, NGOs are exploring blockchain remittance rails, and developers in the XRPL ecosystem are building tools for transparent aid distribution, where every transaction can be tracked on-chain, cutting corruption out of the equation. This is where things start to shift from theory to necessity. For years, people debated, will blockchain ever replace SWIFT? Now the question is, when traditional systems fail, what's left standing? And slowly but surely, the answer looks a lot like distributed ledgers. Systems that don't break under geopolitical pressure. Networks that don't need permission from a single authority to function. Technologies like XRP Ledger that are neutral, not Western, not Eastern, just infrastructure. So while everyone else is focused on the headlines, the politics, the military, the ceasefires, the quiet revolution happening underneath is in the plumbing of global money. And that's why this next phase could be pivotal for XRP. Because once the world realizes that speed, transparency, and neutrality aren't just conveniences, they're survival tools, the institutions that have been hesitant will start to move fast. We're already seeing small hints of it. Liquidity corridors reopening through blockchain pilots. NGOs testing on-chain traceability for relief funds, and central banks reviewing hybrid models where private ledgers like XRPL complement their digital currency infrastructure. It's subtle, but it's happening. And just like that, a coin that was once dismissed as a banker's crypto might end up being the foundation for humanitarian finance in conflict zones. When a war breaks out, people think about soldiers, borders, and politics. But what often gets overlooked is how broken the flow of humanitarian aid becomes. Imagine this, you're sitting in an international aid office trying to send emergency funds to hospitals in Gaza or relief centers in Israel. You're not dealing with theory. You're dealing with lives that depend on the next wire transfer actually arriving. And here's what happens behind the scenes. The traditional financial system starts asking questions. What's the purpose of this transfer? Who's the recipient? Can we verify the source of funds? Every question adds a layer of delay. And each delay means more people waiting for help that doesn't come in time. It's not that these precautions are bad. They're there to stop money laundering or illicit financing. But in a crisis, speed becomes the difference between life and loss. Now, here's where blockchain, and specifically XRP Ledger, starts to shine. Let's get real for a second. Not all crypto systems are practical for humanitarian aid. Bitcoin is too slow and too volatile for large-scale transactions. Ethereum is flexible, but gas fees make micropayments impossible in an emergency. XRP Ledger, on the other hand, offers something that humanitarian groups desperately need. Speed, transactions in 3 to 5 seconds. Low cost, fractions of a cent per transfer. Transparency, every transaction is verifiable on-chain. Neutrality, it works across borders without depending on a single government or bank. This isn't just theory. Over the last few years, Ripple and the XRP ecosystem have worked with nonprofits and financial organizations to explore exactly this, using blockchain to deliver faster, traceable aid to regions in crisis. Think about what that means. Instead of funds moving through 5 different intermediaries, each taking fees and time, blockchain allows direct disbursement to verified recipients or institutions. Every step is recorded, every wallet is trackable, and accountability becomes built-in, something the traditional system has always struggled with. So when people say, how does a coin like XRP even relate to war? This is the connection. In regions where traditional banking is restricted or destroyed, digital ledgers become the only reliable channel for value transfer. And here's the twist. Humanitarian agencies are already experimenting with blockchain to bypass bottlenecks caused by damaged infrastructure or banking restrictions. That's not speculation. It's happening. They've realized that you can't rebuild or save lives if your financial rails are slower than the crisis itself. One aid executive recently said something that stuck with me. We can get drones in the sky faster than we can move money on the ground. That's the reality. Logistics have evolved, but finance hasn't. And Ripple's technology quietly sits right in the middle of that conversation. RippleNet, with its on-demand liquidity ODL feature, can move funds across countries instantly using XRP as a bridge asset, meaning local currencies don't need to be converted through US dollars or expensive correspondent banking chains. Now imagine that in a humanitarian setting, a European donor wants to send €1 million worth of aid directly to a clinic in the Middle East. Traditionally, that money would move through 4 to 5 banks, face compliance checks at each level, and potentially lose 5 to 10% in fees and exchange rates. But through Ripple's ODL model, that transaction can be settled in seconds, directly into a local currency, instantly available for use. No middlemen. No waiting weeks for confirmations. No hidden losses. And this doesn't just help during war, it redefines how aid works everywhere. Because one of the biggest challenges in humanitarian finance is transparency. Billions of dollars are pledged every year, but by the time funds move through agencies, governments, and subcontractors, the actual amount that reaches those in need can shrink dramatically. Blockchain solves that. With an immutable ledger, donors can trace every dollar, from contribution to consumption. It creates proof of impact, which is becoming one of the most demanded features in modern aid systems. Now, think about what that means for trust. In a world where public confidence in institutions is dropping, blockchain brings visibility. And in times of war, visibility builds legitimacy. That's why several humanitarian projects have already begun integrating blockchain-based tracking. Some use Ethereum, some use Stellar, and a growing number are looking at XRP Ledger because of its speed and regulatory friendliness, two critical factors when governments are involved in aid oversight. And here's something deeper to consider. These blockchain systems aren't replacing governments or banks. They're augmenting them. They're giving institutions tools to operate efficiently during emergencies, without losing control or transparency. That's why every major conflict seems to accelerate blockchain adoption quietly behind the scenes. After the Ukraine war, crypto donations proved that blockchain could deliver aid directly. Over $100 million flowed in via verified crypto wallets. That event changed how governments viewed digital assets. Now, with the Israel-Gaza crisis, we're entering a new phase, not just crypto donations, but crypto infrastructure being considered for long-term, institutional-grade humanitarian finance. And XRP sits at the center of that evolution because it bridges legacy systems with modern infrastructure. While Bitcoin challenges the system, XRP connects it. That's the subtle difference most people miss. So when we talk about blockchain being the lifeline, it's not just about speculation or investment. It's about building a system that doesn't collapse under political or geographic pressure. And honestly, this is just the beginning. Every time the world faces another financial choke point, solutions like XRP Ledger look less like alternatives and more like necessities. Because whether it's moving aid to a war zone, rebuilding economies, or reconnecting separated banking systems, blockchain's core promise, speed, transparency, and neutrality, becomes the one thing everyone can agree on. When we look at the Israel-Gaza war beyond the headlines and devastation, something much deeper is unfolding underneath the geopolitical layer. A financial transformation that's quietly setting the stage for how global money will move in times of crisis. And surprisingly, XRP is right in the middle of that conversation. Think about it. Whenever war breaks out, currencies fluctuate wildly, sanctions get imposed, and cross-border transfers become a nightmare. Traditional banking networks like SWIFT become tools of political leverage, not efficiency. For instance, during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, entire nations were cut off from the global financial grid. That same reality now looms over the Middle East. And this is exactly where XRP's real-world utility begins to shine. XRP isn't just another cryptocurrency trying to pump on hype. It was literally designed to solve one of the oldest and most complex problems: how to move money across borders instantly, cheaply, and without friction. In a world where conflicts and sanctions constantly disrupt trade routes and supply chains, the ability to transfer value seamlessly between nations becomes not just a convenience but a necessity. Now, as the Israel-Gaza war sends ripples across the global economy, countries are once again realizing how vulnerable the current financial infrastructure really is. Traditional systems like SWIFT rely heavily on intermediaries and political approval chains. If a bank or nation gets sanctioned, their citizens, even innocent civilians, suffer the consequences of being cut off financially. With blockchain-based systems like RippleNet, powered by XRP, transactions don't need to depend on these gatekeepers. That's why governments, banks, and even humanitarian organizations are beginning to explore blockchain not as a speculative tool but as a geopolitical shield. For example, transferring aid into conflict zones becomes significantly faster and more transparent with distributed ledger technology. Instead of going through endless banking layers, funds can be sent, verified, and settled in seconds. XRP's ledger, known for its energy efficiency and compliance-ready design, provides a system where accountability and speed coexist. And this is where Ripple's global positioning becomes interesting. While Ripple, the company, has often been portrayed as a financial disruptor, it's also become a bridge builder between the crypto world and traditional finance. Its ongoing partnerships with over 300 banks and payment providers globally demonstrate that institutions are not ignoring this shift. The company's connections to regions in the Middle East and Asia, many of which are actively seeking alternatives to the dollar-based system, put XRP in a position of strategic leverage. During war, liquidity dries up. Banks restrict withdrawals. The cost of cross-border transactions spikes. And yet, businesses, families, and humanitarian agencies still need to move money fast. The fact that XRP can facilitate cross-currency transfers without depending on multiple intermediaries gives it a unique advantage. Its role as a bridge asset between fiat currencies, say, Israeli shekels and Jordanian dinars, or even euros and US dollars, means it can bypass the bottlenecks of traditional systems in real time. But here's the part many miss. Ripple's infrastructure doesn't just move money. It moves trust in environments where trust has collapsed. The Israel-Gaza conflict has shown once again that the global financial system is deeply political. XRP's decentralized ledger introduces neutrality into a system dominated by geopolitics, allowing financial value to move freely even when nations cannot. This isn't about choosing sides in a war. It's about recognizing that in the age of digital finance, wars now trigger more than physical displacement. They cause economic disconnection. As countries and corporations watch the ongoing instability, many are quietly looking for systems resilient to geopolitical shocks. XRP's model, bridging different financial systems without bias, fits this new reality perfectly. And let's not forget the broader backdrop. The BRICS Alliance, central bank digital currency, CBDC, experiments, and the growing move toward ISO 20022 compliant networks all point to one thing: a synchronized financial architecture for the next era. XRP, being ISO 20022 compliant, isn't just compatible with this future, it's built for it. That means when the world begins to rebuild systems for global payments post-conflict, assets like XRP will already be fully aligned with the framework central banks are adopting. In essence, the Israel-Gaza conflict is not just a tragic humanitarian event. It's a stress test for the global economy. And just like how COVID-19 accelerated digital payments and remote finance, this war could accelerate the global adoption of decentralized, compliant, and transparent cross-border payment systems. When the dust settles, nations will reassess their dependence on politicized payment rails. They'll want systems that don't weaponize money, systems that keep trade flowing and aid accessible, even in times of chaos. XRP represents that bridge, one that connects speed, neutrality, and regulatory compatibility in a way no other crypto currently can. So while the world watches the conflict unfold on screens, behind the scenes, a quiet revolution in financial infrastructure is being accelerated. XRP's story is becoming less about speculation and more about survival of trust, liquidity, and access in an increasingly divided world. As global tensions continue to rise and the Israel-Gaza conflict tests the resilience of financial systems worldwide, the truth is becoming harder to ignore. The world is being forced to rethink how money moves. And if you're an XRP holder, this moment could define the next massive wave of adoption. Because for the first time, we're seeing how geopolitics, technology, and finance are merging into one single narrative, and XRP is sitting right at the intersection. Now, think about what happens when nations, especially those affected by sanctions, trade restrictions, or instability, start integrating blockchain-based payment solutions. Suddenly, XRP's purpose as a bridge currency stops being theory and becomes survival-level necessity. In the coming months, as the dust settles, the world will not just rebuild cities. It will rebuild trust in its financial systems. And XRP's infrastructure is tailor-made for that reality. Ripple's partnerships with central banks, cross-border remittance providers, and even global organizations like the IMF and World Bank's development partners aren't random. They've been years in the making, laying the foundation for exactly this kind of geopolitical turning point. The company has positioned itself to be the plumbing of the future global economy. connecting CBDCs, digital assets, and fiat currencies in real time. But here's the exciting part. It's not just XRP alone in this journey. Other ISO 20022 assets like XLM, XDC, and HBAR are part of the same movement, building the backbone of a digitized, interoperable world economy. Each plays a unique role, but XRP remains the flagship, the one that bridges banks, nations, and ledgers. So what does this mean for holders? It means understanding that what you own isn't just a coin, it's a position in the next evolution of money. When the global reset takes place, when financial networks get rewired for real-time liquidity and global interoperability, assets like XRP will no longer be speculative. They'll be the engine oil of the new system. And remember, markets move before headlines. The big money always knows what's coming. That's why institutional players have been quietly accumulating, testing, and integrating blockchain solutions long before the public conversation even started. Wall Street, central banks, and payment giants aren't ignoring XRP. They're preparing for the moment when the world needs it most. So, as we watch this geopolitical storm unfold, the real question isn't if the shift is coming, it's when. Because once it hits, it'll happen faster than anyone expects. If you're an XRP holder, this isn't the time to panic or chase hype. It's the time to understand why you're holding. You're positioned on the frontier of a financial revolution that's quietly rewriting global payment systems right before our eyes. When peace returns and the rebuilding begins, XRP will likely be part of the infrastructure that connects nations economically, making cross-border transactions instant, transparent, and politically neutral. So hold strong, stay informed, and remember this. Every major transformation looks chaotic before it looks inevitable. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because the next few weeks could change everything we know about XRP and global finance. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think will happen when global adoption hits. Are we about to witness the biggest financial reset in history?